What if women refuse to date men that are not at least 6 feet tall? This topic is getting quite the attention, so you've probably seen this discourse on social media hundreds of times already. Height standards, hypergamy, complaining men, and defensive women everywhere. The whole discussion is getting kind of heated. But let's just all accept this for a moment and do a little thought experiment. What if women refuse to date men that are not 6 foot? Here's the scenario. For one, every straight woman in the US instantly adopts a hard 6 foot minimum. Doesn't matter how funny, rich, or nice he is. Second, this is America only. Every other country just keeps doing its own thing, meaning women outside of the US will date like usual. And lastly, this preference only stays with the current generation. Future generations can decide on their own if they want to keep this preference or drop it. Cool, so let's look at the actual numbers. America's got about 341.8 million people total. If you just grab the dating age slice, let's say 16 to 45 years old, that's roughly 61 million guys and 60.7 million women. Now here's the fun part. Only about 15% of guys are 6 foot or taller. So out of that 61 million, you're left with just 9.2 million dudes who are actually tall enough. Meanwhile, on the women's side, accounting for those who aren't straight, you're left with roughly 48.6 million heterosexual women. So we got 48.6 million women and 9.2 million eligible guys. That's a whopping 5.3 to 1 ratio. Knowing that, what would happen immediately after all the American women changed their preference? Well, that top 15% of guys instantly become the most popular people in the country. They'll get every swipe, match, and every bit of attention in the dating world. The other 85% just disappear from the pool overnight and become irrelevant. Obviously, social media will lose its mind, and gender wars will become even worse than now. Men, on one hand, will hate on women and hypergamy even more, which will, of course, drive women to defend themselves even more and maybe even disrespect men because of their height. Meanwhile, the guys who are not 6 feet tall will try to fraud anything to reach that 6 foot mark. This also includes lying about height, maybe adding 2 to 3 inches here and there to their true height. Every guy will probably turn towards shoe lifts to keep up with the standards of women. It's a pretty niche thing right now, but those shoes will be a booming industry overnight. And the really committed guys will go to extreme measures like bone lengthening surgery, which will obviously make the healthcare industry tons of money. Some might also give their children growth-enhancing peptides to set them up for the future. But you can only fake height for so long when the filter is strict. For the millions of guys who are like 5'9" and have no workaround, the math gets really simple. No shot at love here, but pretty decent shot basically anywhere else on the planet. So a bunch of them just leave the US. How much is honestly anyone's guess. Moving countries is a big thing. You need money, a job, visa, and the guts to actually do it. But even if it's somewhere between 10% to 40% of the excluded guys, that's anywhere from 11 to 28 million people packing up and leaving. Let's fast forward a few years. In the US, those 9.2 million tall guys become one of the most fought over resource in the country. Cities and college towns known for having a lot of tall guys, think for example big D1 sports schools, suddenly start seeing women relocating just to improve their odds to land with a guy. So they pack their bags and move cities for better chances at love. And when a ton of women all flood into the same handful of towns chasing a tiny fixed supply of guys, rent goes up, which will make real estate very profitable in those regions. When it comes to marriage, overall marriage rates were already sliding before any of this, down something like 60% since 1970. Now you've just yanked 85% of eligible guys out of half the country's dating pool overnight. Marriage rates wouldn't just dip normally, they would fall off a cliff. Birth rates follow right behind, because fewer couples means fewer babies. And babies are the entire engine behind the retirement system. Fewer workers down the line means fewer people paying into the system that's supposed to support everyone retiring. And the guys who left? Well, those are probably gone with no intention of returning. That's about 15 million working age men gone, living, working, and paying taxes for another country now. That's roughly 9% of the US labor force, which sits around 168 million. Male-heavy industries like trades, logistics, or military start losing workers faster than they can replace. The tax money is also now gone. And the timing's brutal, because this lands right as the birth rate drop is kicking in, so the workforce is shrinking from both ends at the same time. Even the women who are supposed to win in this scenario don't really do. That 5.3 to 1 ratio doesn't magically fix itself just because women are trying harder. There's still only 9.2 million guys over 6 foot tall. So what you get is millions of women all competing over a tiny supply, while the guys inside that 15% basically have unlimited options. And when demand for you is that skewed, why would you settle down with just one person? Some of them will probably still commit, sure, but a bunch of them with that much demand won't have to settle. So some of the women who do land a tall guy don't get the stable relationship they were picturing. They get into a rotation. Lots of casual, low commitment relationships, because why would the guy lock it down when there's so many other options? And the much bigger group of women, the ones who never crack into that 15% at all, they're just stuck waiting for a man while being bitter about men. No amount of patience changes a number that small. Also, mental health for both women and short men will get much worse, which is obvious when loneliness gets more common. Height is partly genetic. So if this strong preference somehow held for 30, 40, 50 years, and that tall 15% kept having way more kids because demand for them never let up, you'd actually expect average male height in America to creep up over time. Maybe about a fraction of an inch per generation, but a real, measurable difference that probably wouldn't happen under normal circumstances. But the catch is that personal preferences don't really tend to stick around when they have no actual foundation. There's nothing locking a 22-year-old in the 2050s into a thinking pattern her mom picked up decades earlier, especially if she grew up watching what this preference actually cost the previous generation. And she'll have seen plenty. The women who were stubborn that ended up single for a long time, the mom who got the tall guy and dealt with all the chaos that came with it anyway, the men and friends who weren't around because they packed up and left for better odds somewhere else. The children will see and mostly recognize by looking at the rest of the world that American society is not really at its best. Some daughters nonetheless will double down and stay fully convinced height is non-negotiable because that's just how they were raised. Others go the complete opposite direction after watching it play out up close. Most probably land somewhere in the middle, pretty close to where dating preferences already sit today, because that's usually where things settle once the extreme version has run its course. So if you zoom all the way out 50 years later, you realize that it's not some permanent cultural revolution. It's one generation going through a massive self-inflicted shakeup. Fewer marriages, fewer babies, weird housing prices, a wave of guys who left and never came back, and then everything slowly drifting back toward normal afterward.